Sometimes the truth hits you like a freight train when you're least expecting it. I'm Angie Colton, and at 32, I thought I had relationships figured out. Turns out, I was spectacularly wrong about pretty much everything. It started at a gallery opening in downtown Portland. I was there with my friend Rebecca, nursing a glass of terrible wine and pretending to understand abstract art when I spotted him across the room. Tall, sandy-haired, with these laugh lines that suggested he actually enjoyed life. He was standing alone, studying a painting that looked like someone had sneezed on canvas, and something about his genuine concentration made me curious. "That's Caleb Walsh," Rebecca whispered, following my gaze. "He's new at the marketing firm downtown, just moved here from Chicago." I watched him for a few more minutes, noting how he moved through the crowd with an easy confidence that wasn't trying too hard. When he caught me looking, instead of that practiced smile most guys flash, he looked genuinely surprised and pleased. That's when I knew I was in trouble. We talked for 2 hours that night. Real conversation, not the usual dance of half-truths and careful presentations. He told me about leaving his corporate job to try something creative, about missing his family back in Illinois, about his ridiculous fear of houseplants because he'd killed everyone he'd ever owned. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. "Can I take you to dinner sometime?" he asked as the evening wound down. "Somewhere that doesn't serve wine this bad." I said yes, but even as I gave him my number, I was already calculating. This one felt different. This one had potential, which meant I needed to be smart about it. I'd been burned before, badly. My last serious relationship had ended when I discovered my ex was already planning his exit strategy while I was planning our future. I'd promised myself I wouldn't make that mistake again. The next time around, I'd make sure any man I dated understood my value before I gave him everything. So when Caleb called the next day to set up our first date, I was ready with my strategy. I would make him wait for sex. Not because I didn't want him, the chemistry was undeniable, but because I wanted him to see me as more than just another casual hookup. I wanted him to work for it, to prove he was serious about building something real. Our first date was at this little Italian place he'd discovered. He showed up 15 minutes early, brought me daisies because he remembered I'd mentioned loving simple flowers, and pulled out my chair like his grandmother had taught him manners. We talked until they started stacking chairs around us. "I had the best time," he said, walking me to my car. When he leaned in to kiss me, I let him, but when his hands started to wander, I pulled back gently. "I'm not that kind of girl," I said softly, looking up at him through my lashes. "I hope you understand." The disappointment flickered across his face for just a moment before he nodded. "Of course, I respect that. Perfect." He was already hooked. Our second date was even better. A farmer's market followed by a long walk through the park. He held my hand like it was precious, asked thoughtful questions about my work as a physical therapist, and listened when I talked about my dreams of maybe opening my own practice someday. "You're amazing," he said as we sat on a bench watching kids play on the swings. "I feel like I could talk to you forever." When he kissed me goodbye that night, I could feel his restraint. He wanted more, but he was respecting my boundaries. It was working exactly as I'd planned. But here's the thing about plans. They only work if you're honest about what you're actually trying to accomplish. And I wasn't being honest, not with Caleb and not with myself. While I was building this perfect foundation with him, I was also still seeing Blake Morrison. We'd been casual friends with benefits for about 8 months, and I saw no reason to complicate things by ending it just because I was exploring something new with Caleb. Blake and I had an understanding, no strings, no expectations. Just good chemistry and mutual convenience. Blake worked in sales for a tech company and traveled constantly, which made our arrangement perfect. He'd text when he was in town, I'd text back if I was free, and we'd spend a few hours together with no discussion of feelings or futures. It was exactly what I needed to take the pressure off my relationship with Caleb. In my mind, I was being practical. I was getting my physical needs met with Blake while building something meaningful with Caleb. It wasn't cheating because Caleb and I weren't exclusive yet, and what he didn't know couldn't hurt him. I was protecting both of us from the complications that came with rushing into physical intimacy before we'd established real emotional intimacy. The rationalization was so smooth, I almost believed it myself. By our fourth date, Caleb was getting frustrated. We'd gone to a concert, and afterward, back at his apartment, things got heated quickly. But when he started unbuttoning my shirt, I stopped him. "I'm sorry," I said, sitting up and adjusting my clothes. "I know this is hard, but I need you to understand something. I've been with guys who only wanted one thing, and I got hurt. With you, I want it to be different. I want it to mean something." He ran his hands through his hair, and I could see him fighting between desire and respect. "Angie, I care about you. This isn't just physical for me." "I know," I said, touching his face gently. "But I need more time. Can you be patient with me?" He nodded, pulling me close. "Of course. I'm sorry if I made you feel pressured." I let him hold me, feeling victorious and guilty in equal measure. Victorious because I could see how much he wanted me, how much my boundaries were making him value what we had. Guilty because 3 nights later, I was in Blake's hotel room, not thinking about emotional intimacy at all. This went on for 2 months. Caleb would plan these thoughtful dates. We'd have deep conversations about our hopes and dreams, and I'd give him just enough physical affection to keep him interested while maintaining my boundaries. Meanwhile, Blake would text from whatever city he was in. I'd meet him when he was back in Portland, and I'd get the release I needed without any complicated emotions. I told myself I was being smart. I was taking time to really know Caleb before making any big decisions. I was protecting my heart and his by not rushing into anything. The fact that I was sleeping with Blake didn't change my feelings for Caleb or my commitment to building something real with him. But the truth was, I was scared. Scared that if I slept with Caleb too soon, he'd lose interest. Scared that if I ended things with Blake, I'd put all my emotional eggs in one basket and get hurt again. Scared that if I was completely honest about what I wanted, I'd have to face the possibility that neither arrangement was really working for me. The beginning of the end came when Caleb got promoted to senior account manager. He was over the moon, talking about his new responsibilities and the team he'd be working with. I was genuinely happy for him, but I also felt a familiar pang of anxiety. Success made men confident, and confident men had options. "I'm excited for you to meet some of the people I work with," he said over dinner. "There's this guy Blake who just joined our team. He's really cool. I think you two would get along great." I nearly choked on my wine. "Blake?" "Yeah, Blake Morrison. He's got this great sense of humor and he's traveled everywhere. I was thinking we could all hang out sometime." My heart started racing. "Oh, that's nice. But maybe we should keep work and personal life separate for now? I mean, you're still new in your position." Caleb looked puzzled. "I guess, but it's not like that. Blake's a good guy. I really think you'd like him." I spent the next week in a state of barely controlled panic. I tried to convince myself that Blake would be discreet, that he'd understand the delicate situation and not say anything to jeopardize what Caleb and I had built. But Blake had never been particularly tactful, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all going to blow up in my face. I considered coming clean to Caleb, but how could I explain that I'd been sleeping with his coworker while telling him we needed to wait because he was special? How could I make him understand that my feelings for him were real, even though my actions suggested otherwise? Instead, I did what I always did when things got complicated. I tried to control the situation. I started suggesting we spend more time at my place instead of going out. I made excuses about being tired when he wanted to meet friends. I even considered faking an illness to avoid any potential group gatherings. But Caleb was too excited about his new job and his new friendships to be deterred by my sudden antisocial behavior. He kept pushing for us to expand our social circle, to integrate our lives more completely. He saw it as the natural next step in our relationship. I saw it as the beginning of the end. The inevitable happened on a Friday night in October. Caleb had been talking all week about this team dinner his company was hosting, and he'd finally worn me down enough that I'd agreed to go. I spent the entire day alternating between nausea and false hope that maybe Blake wouldn't be there, that maybe he'd be traveling or sick or abducted by aliens. No such luck. I spotted him the moment we walked into the restaurant. He was sitting at the far end of a long table, looking relaxed and confident in that way that had always attracted me. When he saw me, his expression shifted from casual interest to surprise to something that looked dangerously like amusement. "Angie," Caleb said, his hand on my lower back as he guided me through the crowd. "Come meet everyone." I pasted on my brightest smile and prepared for the performance of my life. Maybe I could pull this off. Maybe Blake would play along, and we could all pretend we were meeting for the first time. "This is my girlfriend, Angie," Caleb said proudly as we approached the table. "Angie, this is Blake Morrison, the guy I've been telling you about." Blake stood up, extending his hand with that knowing smile I'd seen so many times before. "Actually, Caleb, Angie and I have already met." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face as I watched Caleb's expression change from confusion to something harder to read. "Oh," Caleb said slowly, "I didn't realize you two knew each other." "We've been acquainted for a while now," Blake continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Haven't we, Angie?" I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run. Instead, I forced myself to laugh, trying to play it off as casually as possible. "Blake and I have run into each other around town a few times. Portland's a small city." But Blake wasn't done. "Small city indeed. We've had some great conversations, haven't we? I especially remember that night at the Heathman." "Blake." My voice was sharper than I intended. I'm sure Caleb doesn't need to hear about every casual encounter, but the damage was done. I could see the wheels turning in Caleb's mind, connecting dots I'd hoped would stay scattered. The way Blake was looking at me, the familiarity in his tone, the timing of our supposed casual meetings, it all painted a picture I couldn't explain away. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and mounting dread. Blake, to his credit, didn't explicitly reveal the nature of our relationship, but his knowing looks and casual references to shared experiences made it clear that we were much more than casual acquaintances. Caleb was quiet on the drive home, and I could feel him building up to the conversation I'd been dreading for months. "So," he said finally, as we sat in his driveway, "Blake Morrison, what about him? Are you going to tell me the truth about how you know him?" I could have lied. I could have stuck to my story about casual encounters and coincidental meetings. But looking at Caleb's face, seeing the hurt and confusion there, I realized I was tired of lying. Tired of managing multiple versions of the truth, tired of pretending that what I'd been doing was somehow noble or justified. "We've been seeing each other," I said quietly, casually, for about 8 months. The silence stretched between us like a physical thing. When Caleb finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. 8 months? So you were seeing him when we met?" "Yes." "And you've been seeing him this whole time? While you've been telling me we need to wait because I'm special?" I wanted to explain about the boundaries I'd set, about how Blake was just physical while Caleb was emotional. I wanted to tell him that my feelings for him were real, that what we had was different and important. But the words stuck in my throat because I finally understood how they would sound. "It's not what you think," I said instead. "What is it then?" His voice was getting louder now, the careful control starting to crack. "Because it looks like you've been sleeping with my coworker while telling me you need to take things slow because you want our relationship to be meaningful." "That's not, it's more complicated than that." "How is it complicated, Angie? Either you were sleeping with him or you weren't. Either you were being honest with me or you weren't." I started crying then, ugly tears that I hoped would soften him, make him remember how much he cared about me. I was trying to protect what we had. I didn't want to rush into anything and ruin it. By sleeping with someone else? By making sure I was ready for you. By making sure what we had was real before we took that step. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing everything. The late nights when I'd claimed to be tired. The times I'd been unavailable. the careful way I'd managed our physical relationship while apparently having no such boundaries with Blake. "Get out," he said finally. "Caleb, please, get out of my car, Angie. I can't even look at you right now." I wanted to fight, to explain, to make him understand that I'd been trying to do the right thing in the only way I knew how. But the look on his face told me there was nothing I could say that would fix this. I got out of the car and watched him drive away, taking with him the best relationship I'd ever had. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. Caleb wouldn't return my calls or texts. When I showed up at his apartment, he wouldn't answer the door. I tried reaching out through mutual friends, but word had gotten around about what happened, and suddenly everyone was too busy to get involved. Blake, meanwhile, seemed to find the whole situation hilarious. He'd text me occasionally with updates about work, mentioning how awkward things were between him and Caleb, how the whole team was talking about the drama. He didn't seem to understand that he'd destroyed something important to me, or maybe he just didn't care. I threw myself into work, putting in extra hours and taking on additional clients. I told myself I was better off without someone who couldn't handle a complicated situation, who couldn't see that I'd been trying to protect what we had. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't escape the truth that was slowly crystallizing in my mind. I hadn't been protecting anything. I'd been protecting myself. From vulnerability, from the risk of being hurt, from the possibility that if I put everything on the line with Caleb, it might not work out. I'd been so focused on controlling the outcome that I'd forgotten to actually participate in the relationship. The real wake-up call came 3 months later when I ran into Caleb at a friend's birthday party. I'd been avoiding social events, but Rachel had guilt-tripped me into coming, promising that it would be a small gathering of people I knew. Caleb was there with a woman I didn't recognize. She was pretty in an understated way, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. But what struck me most was how Caleb looked at her, the way he listened when she talked, the way he seemed completely present and engaged. It was the way he used to look at me before I'd destroyed his trust. I watched them together for a while, and it was obvious that he was happy. Genuinely, uncomplicated happy in a way that made my chest ache. This woman didn't need to create elaborate strategies or manage multiple relationships to feel secure. She just was, and that was enough for him. When he saw me, Caleb nodded politely, but didn't come over. There was no anger in his expression anymore, just a kind of distant sadness that somehow hurt more than his rage had. I left the party early and drove around for hours, thinking about the person I'd been and the person I wanted to become. I'd spent so much time protecting myself from getting hurt that I'd forgotten how to actually love someone. I'd been so focused on being valued that I'd forgotten how to be valuable. The truth was, I'd been terrified of Caleb from the moment I met him. Terrified of how much I could care about him, of how much power he could have to hurt me. So I'd kept Blake as insurance, as proof that I didn't need Caleb, that I was still in control of my own heart. But controlling love isn't the same as experiencing it. And what I'd done wasn't about protecting our relationship. It was about protecting myself from fully entering it. I thought about the woman I'd seen him with, how she'd seemed so comfortable in her own skin, so unafraid of being seen and known. I envied her certainty, her ability to show up completely without hedging her bets or managing the outcome. It took me a long time to stop checking his social media, to stop driving past his apartment, to stop hoping he'd reach out. But eventually, I did. I had to, because holding on to the fantasy that I could somehow fix what I'd broken was keeping me from facing the real work I needed to do. I also had to forgive myself, which was harder than I'd expected. I'd made a mistake, a big one, but I wasn't a monster. I was a flawed person who'd been doing the best she could with the tools she had at the time. The key was making sure I developed better tools for the future. It's been a year now since that night at the restaurant. I still think about Caleb sometimes. Wonder if he's happy, if he's still with that woman from the party. I hope he is. He deserves someone who can love him without conditions or strategies. Someone who sees his worth without needing to prove her own. I'm different now. though the changes have been subtle and gradual. I'm more honest in my relationships, more willing to be vulnerable even when it's uncomfortable. I ended things with Blake completely, recognizing that our arrangement had been a crutch that kept me from developing real intimacy skills. I'm dating someone new now, Grant, a teacher I met at a community service event. He's patient and kind, and when he told me he was falling for me, I didn't immediately start calculating how to maintain the upper hand. Instead, I told him I was falling for him too, and I meant it. We're taking things slow, but for the right reasons this time. Not because I'm managing his interest or protecting myself from vulnerability, but because we're both coming out of complicated situations and want to build something solid together. I've been honest with him about my past, about the mistakes I've made and the work I'm doing to be better. It was one of the scariest conversations I've ever had, but also one of the most liberating. He listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and told me he appreciated my honesty. We've all got history, he said, holding my hand across the table. What matters is who you are now and who you want to become. I think about that conversation a lot, especially when I'm tempted to fall back into old patterns of protection and control. The person I want to become is someone who can love openly, who can be vulnerable without being reckless, who can trust without needing guarantees. I still think I was right that Caleb was special, but I realize now that the way to honor something special isn't to protect it from reality. It's to show up fully and let it be real, messy, and uncertain. It's to choose love over fear, even when love offers no promises about the outcome. I lost Caleb because I was too scared to really have him. I thought I was being smart, but I was actually being cowardly. I thought I was protecting what we had, but I was actually preventing it from becoming what it could have been. The hardest part isn't losing him. It's knowing that I lost him because of my own limitations, my own inability to trust that I was worth loving just as I was. But maybe that's the lesson I needed to learn, even if it came at such a high cost. I can't go back and do things differently with Caleb, but I can make sure I don't make the same mistakes again. I can choose to be brave instead of strategic, authentic instead of perfect, vulnerable instead of protected. It's still scary, opening my heart without knowing how the story will end. But it's also the only way to write a story worth telling.